Nick Kassotis was a Navy JAG, a trained prosecutor. After divorcing his first wife, he was hit with a $1.5 million divorce judgment. Then Nick and his second wife, Mindy, went on the run. But what were they running from? Was it that seven-figure judgment, or was someone out to do them harm? Mindy ended up murdered and dismembered. Prosecutors say it was Nick who did it, but Kassotis took the stand and denied all the charges, pointing the finger at a mysterious figure he calls Jim McIntyre, a man who many believe does not even exist. Well, now all the evidence is in and the jury has spoken, and we have all the fallout from today's dramatic verdict. But first, it was Thanksgiving of 1998 when Norma Patton said goodbye to her daughter, Melissa, and told her that she loved her. That would be the last conversation they would ever have. Melissa went missing, and for years it remained a mystery. But in reality, part of the mystery was solved within a year when some of her remains were recovered, chopped up in black trash bags in Atlanta, Georgia, not far from where she lived. But for several years, those remains were unidentified until 2003, when the Flint River Killer was arrested, a man who admitted to being a serial killer. That man is also Melissa's father. But then, once again, it would take years, decades, for someone to actually be charged with Melissa's murder. And it wasn't her father. It was her husband, Christopher Wolfenbarger. Wolfenbarger is now on trial, and the jury will have to figure out if it was the husband or the serial killer father who killed Melissa. I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. Buckle up for this story that we are covering right now, and it's a trial that we're covering here on Court TV. I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like it. The layers and the intrigue and trying to figure out what happened, how it happened, who's telling the truth, and exactly what's going on. And in the middle of it all, we're talking about a serial killer. You know, when it comes to serial killers, Ted Bundy, to me, is the most famous serial killer, right? Like, he's the one who sort of set the standard. When you talk about serial killers in any conversation, people are going to mention his name. TV movies, documentaries, and just his trials. As a matter of fact, one of his trials was one of the first cases that was televised. There were cameras inside the courtroom in one of his trials. Go online, you'll see clips of it. Now, that's one kind of serial killer. There's other kinds. There was because Ted Bundy, I don't think he ever wanted to get caught. And when he did get caught, he escaped and got caught again. He wanted to be under the radar. The one who scared me as a child was David Berkowitz, son of Sam, the .44 caliber killer who terrorized New York City. People were afraid to go outside. He was going after, couples that were parked in cars, lovers, and mostly younger adult women. But I was a child living across the river in New Jersey, and I was scared to death of this guy. And this is a guy who, would write notes and corresponded with a local journalist. This was a guy who was more like one of the villains in Batman or something. And it was scary, but it was a different kind of serial killer. The most disturbing serial killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, when you think about, what he did. And he, too, is one of those names that people always talk about, but what he did was extremely disturbing. And Court TV covered his sentencing and some of the most painful victim impact statements that ever had to be made in that case. Now, tonight, we're talking about the Flint River Killer. And I'll be honest with you, before this case, didn't know much about this guy. Didn't know much about him at all. He's not Ted Bundy, he's not Jeffrey Dahmer, he's not Son of Sam, but he's a serial killer. Absolutely is. So he is connected to this case. It is his daughter who is the victim of a murder. Yet, he is not the one being charged. What are the odds? that the daughter of a serial killer gets murdered, number one, and then gets murdered by someone other than the serial killer father. But that's the case that prosecutors are presenting. It's not him. But who is he? Who is he? Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas joining me live in studio tonight. Okay, let's start here. He's the Flint River Killer.
Right.
Carl Patton. Who were his victims? Who did he kill?
Well, Vinnie, this all took place across the metro Atlanta area in Georgia in the late 70s. He had 5 murders strewn from 1973 to 1977. Again, these are known as the Flint River murders because the bodies were found in Georgia's Flint River. And he also had this accomplice named Joe Cleveland, who was a friend and he was a firefighter. But Vinnie, we have to break it down in this timeline to kind of show you, the sequence of events that went down in the late 70s with this guy, Carl Patton. So in November of 1977, a woman named Marie Jackson Wyatt offered to pay Carl Patton $15,000 to kill her common-law husband, this man named Fred Wyatt. Now, she had taken out a life insurance policy on him. She had suspected Fred Wyatt of cheating with this woman named Betty Jo Eflin. So what does Carl go do? He calls his friend Joe, his accomplice, and they go gun down Fred Wyatt and Betty Jo Eflin, who were roommates and living together at the time. So then, Vinnie, we fast forward to a little over a month later in December of 1977. Carl tells his wife that he thinks his friend Joe Cleveland is running around town talking about these murders, telling mutual acquaintances that they did this horrific crime just a few weeks before. So what does Carl do? Carl ultimately lures Joe and Joe's roommate, who is this woman named Liddy Evans, could be assumed to be his girlfriend, to a location, and he guns them down too, Vinnie. This was his accomplice. This guy helped him carry out this crime and hide the bodies and destroy evidence, but he guns him down too, along with this woman named Liddy Evans. So then Patton goes almost 30 years. We fast forward almost 30 years, 26 years to be exact. He goes 30 years without being arrested, Vinnie. That is until February of 2003. Now, of course, from 1977, the late 70s up until 2003, DNA technology had advanced and police had linked Carl Patton through evidence to the murder of Liddy Evans. So then we go along, he goes to trial in March of 2003. There's not much of a gap between when he was arrested and when he goes to trial. During that trial, he eventually pleads guilty to these murders. And Vinnie, remember, we've only talked about 4 murders so far. Remember I said he murdered 5 people. So following the trial, following getting those life sentences, following pleading guilty and confessing to those 4, he unexpectedly, a month after the trial in April of 2003, confesses to killing another man back in 1973, this guy named Richard Jackson. Now, you remember, I said in 1977, this woman named Marie Jackson Wyatt hired him to kill her common-law husband, Fred Wyatt. Well, Marie Jackson Wyatt hired him to kill Mr. Richard Jackson, who was her first husband in 1973. So she's connected and hired him, paid him money to go kill 2 of her husbands in the late 70s. And Vinnie, it was interesting about that trial of Richard Jackson. His daughter got on the stand and thanked Carl Patton for killing her father because evidently he was really abusive to her and her mother. So that was just an interesting tidbit. So 5 murders, Vinnie: Fred Wyatt, Betty Jo Eflin in 77, Joe Cleveland, Liddy Evans in 77, and Russell Jackson in 1973.
So he's a contract killer, it seems like.
Hired gun.
A hired gun, kind of like the Iceman, but to a lesser extent, he worked for the mob. This guy's doing independent work. So now let's connect it to this trial and this case involving his daughter. Now, how and why were the police and Carl Patton, the Flint River Killer, talking about his daughter, Melissa?
Well, Vinnie, it's as simple as when he got arrested, he already knew he was guilty, and he told detectives, hey, can you look into my missing daughter? At that point, Melissa had been missing for a number of years. He just asked detectives, can you look into this case? And so during...
So Patton is saying, look into the case. So police find out about his daughter missing from him?
Yes. Okay. From him being arrested for these previous murders 30 years beforehand. And the prosecution today in their opening statement kind of broke that down. Take a listen to this.
Ultimately, Melissa doesn't get identified until 2003. And what triggered the identification ultimately is the arrest of Melissa Wolfenbarger's father. You're going to hear that Melissa Wolfenbarger's father essentially pled guilty to committing murder himself, made multiple murders himself. And when he was arrested, it was a notorious publication, it was a notorious arrest. It garnered a lot of attention. You're going to hear that Carl Patton asked the lead detective when he was arrested, after he confessed, he asked the detective, told him that his daughter was missing for 3 years, he had no leads. He asked if he could find his daughter. Well, the detective contacted the Fulton County Medical Examiner's Office. We had this unidentified skull that they found 3 years ago. And with Carl Patton's statement, they obtained the medical dental records from Melissa Wolfenbarger's dentist, William Grant. Who had a pediatric practice in the 80s and 90s. He obtained Melissa's original records, x-rays, and they had Dr. Mary Beth Hopkins, a forensic dentist with the medical examiner's office, conducted an examination, looked at the x-rays, looked at the fillings, looked at the dimensions of the teeth, and was able to make a conclusive determination that the skull that was found in April 1999 was in fact the skull that belonged to Melissa Wolfenbarger, because the dental records matched the impressions that she took from the skull. It was a match.
So, Vinnie, you heard it there. Essentially, maybe if he didn't get caught, we would not be sitting here today. Maybe Melissa would not have been identified.
The only reason they know about Melissa is from the serial killer father who provides information. Then they match it and they do they identify these remains that they had for years.
So many layers.
Okay. You mentioned Cleveland. Did Patton have any other help, Carl Patton, the serial killer?
All right, he had Joe Cleveland, Vinnie, but he also had somebody else who was a little bit closer to him than Joe Cleveland. Take a listen to this portion of the defense's opening statement today. They break it down.
Melissa's father, Carl Patton, committed a string of murders in the late 1970s. He was suspected of those murders for a long time. He was investigated, but they were not prosecuted and proved until 2003, 4 years after Melissa's disappearance and death. You'll be presented with evidence that Norma Patton, his wife, helped him directly commit at least 2 of those murders, to dispose of the bodies, to clean up the crime scenes, and to wrap up the bodies and dispose of them in ways that are somewhat similar to the way Melissa's remains were found.
Vinnie, his own wife. So when he got arrested in 2003, soon after, she went straight to the police and said, hey, I'll testify against him. I did some of these things. I was an accomplice to this crime, but I'll testify if you give me immunity from being an accomplice to those murders.
She got immunity.
She got immunity. And Vinnie, she got off with only 12 months of probation and a $1,000 fine for testifying against him. And she was the glue that brought it all together, like that brought the whole puzzle together, telling about the hired gun aspect of it, how much money they were making, where they dipped the bodies and burning the evidence.
I mean, if you look at the Adelson trial, which is coming up, it's like Don Adelson, Catherine McBanoa are in the middle of this all, and they get caught up in the same thing. But she got immunity to provide the information. So when her daughter goes missing, she knows that she and her husband were involved in 5 murders.
It makes crazy sense, right? That's wild.
Unreal. All right. Cody Thomas, thank you so much. Wow. All right, I've got more to get to. Norma Patton. This is, again, the mother of the victim in the trial that we're covering, but also the wife and co-conspirator, because she got immunity, she's a co-conspirator of the serial killer father. So what was her reaction? What was her husband, the serial killer's reaction to the arrest of their son-in-law for the murder of their daughter, Melissa? Take a listen.
We have finally made it. He's in custody. And now we just need to get over the last hurdle and get him convicted.
Do you have your suspicions early about him?
Oh, yes, from day one, as soon as I realized she was missing.
Do you know what your husband Carl's reaction was when he was in prison and he got the news that Melissa had been murdered, and then got the news that Melissa's husband Christopher was arrested for it?
Well, he was devastated when he found out she had been murdered, but he was deliriously happy as soon as he found out Chris had been arrested. Someone from the DOC actually went down to the prison to tell him personally, or he would not have found out until later in the week. And he was just jumping up in joy and called me as soon as he could get to the phone. As soon as they turned the phones on, he called me to tell me that he knew.
So the serial killer is celebrating in prison that they caught the man who murdered his daughter. This is, have you ever seen anything like this? I haven't. Let's bring in our think tank. Joining us, criminal defense attorney, former district attorney Matthew Mangino, and the chief public defender for Oakland County, Michigan, representing the Oxford High School shooter, Paulette Lofton, is here as well. Whoa. Like, whoa. The more you learn, you're like, what is going on with this family? Now, another part of this, Matt, is that no one's reporting Melissa being missing. Like, this is insanity in all this. Like, this family, the mother and the father of the victim, know that they are involved in serial killing of human beings for hire. Like, they know that. What?
Well, yeah, this is
bizarre.
Well, right. I mean, when you look at this timeline, 1998, she goes missing. After a while, I mean, Christmas, she doesn't come by. Later, when it's her mother's birthday, she doesn't call. Finally, they report her missing. They find these remains in 1999. They misidentify them. They finally identify them because of her father, who's a serial killer. And then there's no arrest until 2024. First of all, Vinnie, it's hard to be sympathetic with the victim's family. I mean, these people are killers, and they're elated now that their daughter's killer has been found. Hooray! That's great for them. But this is really twisted. What we hear, as this case, begins to, come to trial. It's really, almost beyond comprehension when you try to put all these pieces together. It is certainly as strange a case I've ever read about.
Now, Paulette, I often make fun of criminal defense attorneys that they point the finger over here, they point it over there. Oh, yeah, sure, everybody's the boogeyman. But the victim's father is literally a serial killer along with the mother. Like, the jury's got to get past that, right? Like, the jury, this is going to be a huge part of this case for this jury. The prosecutor's got to say, and got to prove it, right? But got to say, don't look at the serial killer and his wife who got immunity. They had nothing to do with this. They're the victims. Wow.
This is quite a cast of characters. This seems like a made-for-TV movie. I am sure the jurors during openings, I think their heads would be spinning. That is a lot of information. Obviously, they're already going to be stunned. Oh, goodness, we're here to decide on a homicide. That's a lot of stress. And then to hear all of these layers. And like you said, yes, defense attorneys, we love to point the finger when we can. And if there is ever a case that you should be able to point the finger and the jury should have some credibility when it comes to that, and the evidence you're able to produce, it's going to be this. I mean, how are any of the witnesses going to be credible? Are they going to call mom and dad, both of which admitted that they have committed serious felonies?
Well, we've got good news. Good news for the victims of dad. He's passed away in prison. He just recently passed away in prison, so he's gone. So I mean, for the defense, it's even more of a gift, right? You point the finger at the serial killer, and the serial killer can't speak up for himself because he's gone. Wow. All right. Stay by, folks. This is, again, the more you peel back the pieces of this thing, the more, like Paulette said, your head is going to be spinning. When we come back, so what is the evidence against the husband? We'll go through that, plus coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, she was the sharp-tongued matriarch accused of turning a bitter custody battle into a deadly murder plot. Now Donna Adelson faces trial for murder. What is the evidence against Donna? Tonight, we investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight, 9/8 Central, only on Court TV.
Donna Adelson is facing charges of murder, the death of her former son-in-law.
Now that Donna has turned into a defendant, what's next for the Adelson clan?
The matriarch mastermind murder trial begins next week, only on Court TV.
Christopher Wolfenbarger was the primary suspect. I'll just tell you that. He was the person, the main person that they were looking at. He wasn't the only person, because you got to conduct a thorough sifting investigation, but they had evidence that Christopher and Melissa were involved in a tumultuous relationship, that Christopher was abusive, that he had struck her on multiple occasions. They had evidence that he had caused a black eye, that she had witnesses that observed bruises on her neck. They had evidence that at some point, Melissa applied for a protective order to prevent contact with this defendant.
So this was a difficult relationship, right? Melissa, the victim, protective order against her husband, who is the defendant in this murder trial. But think about this. Think about the dynamics right here. You've got Melissa being in an abusive relationship, according to prosecutors. The father and the mother of the woman in the abusive relationship are like serial killers. I mean, unbelievable that the husband did not end up being gone, right? He could have been murdered by them. You're abusing my daughter? Well, I'll kill you. Killed 5 other people, why not? Because at that point, had not been caught. He was still a free man. Okay, let's listen to more of the Deputy District Attorney Vince Fawcett talking about the case, this abuse case against Melissa's husband, the defendant in this case.
By the time this case comes up, on March 1999, you'll see this document, in particular, state court documents, actually filing the formal charge of battery against this defendant, 1998. By the time it comes up to court, they can't find Melissa. Can't find her in March 1999. No way of knowing a month and a half later, her head was found in front of his job. And I'm going to say this too. Less than a minute drive from his house in walking distance.
Okay, so there was a court date for the abuse case, and then all of a sudden, Melissa doesn't show up. She is gone. And then a month later, they find a human head, but don't identify it. Let's bring back in our think tank, still with us, Matthew Mangino, Paulette Lofton, and joining us now, criminal defense attorney Josh Colesrud. All right, great to see you tonight, Josh, joining the crew. What are your thoughts about this? I mean, I am shocked that the daughter of a serial killer and his wife who helped him is being abused by a man, and he lives, right? I mean, he very well could have been the 6th victim of this serial killing couple.
Yeah, that's right. You know, this is a strange situation. And, you know, you just played a clip, though, of, you know, some domestic violence information. And the reason why the prosecutors think that's important is because they're trying to create some type of motive, right? They need circumstantial evidence to do that. However, you know, there's a huge, 400-pound gorilla in the room, which is, how are you going to disprove this third-party defense that the serial killer parents weren't involved in all, especially because there's no forensic evidence, and they destroyed the VHS tape back in 1999 that showed a dog carrying away the head of the victim. The prosecution has, a lot of issues in this case, and the defense was right. They have some holes, some huge, a Grand Canyon full of holes that are going to be able to be exploited.
Let's take a listen to a little bit more from Vince Fawcett in his opening statement.
She just remembers her mother kind of disappearing one day. And she'll tell you that one of the oddest things that she cannot reconcile is almost immediately after Melissa just vanished, this defendant essentially just removes all of her stuff out of the house. You can see the pictures of mother, belongings, and things of that nature. It's gone. While she was growing up, she would constantly ask him, "Where's my mother?" And you would expect that you would have heard an answer at some point, some type of explanation, which she would tell you that he never answered her questions. He never told her how to look for her. He never told her I ever reported her missing. Nothing. In fact, she would tell you that this defendant would tell her while he was growing up that he knows how to get rid of a body. He knows how to not get caught. He also told his daughter, and you will hear this from her mouth, that he had a place to go on the run if he needed to.
This may be some of the most compelling evidence, I think, for prosecutors, Paulette, because they've got the daughter remembering, right? A daughter's going to remember her mom's gone, and then all of a sudden dad's getting rid of all of her stuff immediately. And by the way, dad is not calling the police saying that she's missing.
There's a lot of strange things. I think her testimony is going to be extremely important because I think she'll have that credibility that maybe victim's mom, if mom was called, would not have, or other people in the family would not have. But the daughter living through it, living there, experiencing dad's behaviors, his activities, things that he did, things that he said, that's definitely an inside look. And I think jurors look at that a little bit differently when it's coming from the daughter of someone, right? It's obviously going to be very difficult for her to testify, lost the mother, and now is potentially convicting dad. So I think that the jury will give her some credibility.
Let's take a listen here to Tina Patton, who is the serial killer's other daughter, the sister of the victim, Melissa, and we see the family picture here. Let's take a listen.
We were sitting having breakfast one morning, me, Melissa, Chris, Troy, and there's another waitress sitting there, Diane. She was a friend of mine. She'd been working with me for a while, and we were all sitting there eating breakfast, just having a conversation, talking about whatever. And then all of a sudden, Chris pops off with, "Well, I know how to get rid of a body if I need to." And me, Diane, and Troy looked at each other like, what? Because we were just talking nonsense about silly little stuff or about the news of the day or whatever, just cutting up laughing. And then all of a sudden this comment comes out of his mouth.
Matthew Mangino, how is that incriminating?
Well, I mean, you could look at it two ways. I mean, number one, if he actually said that, it has some characteristics of an incriminating statement because obviously his wife disappeared. But there's also the idea that this could be a self-serving statement made by the victim's sister in this case. I mean, certainly this is a circumstantial case, and they're going to hit hard at that, and they're going to hit hard at the victim's parents' background. And the fact that there's no blood evidence, there's no DNA evidence and all these things. But I think what's so important here is you have a husband whose wife disappears and he says, "Oh, I think she just went on to start a new life." And he does have a history of abuse, and we know that. So the prosecution is going to have to connect those dots if they want to be successful here, proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Christopher's responsible for his wife's death.
Yeah, and I think it'd be a much clearer path if you didn't have the serial killers in the way. Like that is some hurdle. But prosecutors need to get over it. They need to prove the case and make sure this jury does not believe that is a reasonable alternative theory in what happened to Melissa. Think tanks staying where they are. When we come back, verdict day in another case involving another wife who was dismembered and another husband who was charged with that murder. We'll show you the verdict and all the reaction. Nick Kassotis, the man with the long tales that he likes to tell.
State of Georgia versus Nicholas James Kassotis. Count 1, malice murder, guilty. Count 2, felony murder, guilty. Count 3, aggravated assault, guilty. Count 4, concealing death of another, guilty.
Okay, I don't think any of us were surprised, right? Last night we went through his testimony and his stories, and he's pointing the finger at Jimmy McIntyre, and there's like no evidence of Jimmy McIntyre. He's supposed to be with the FBI. He's supposed to be handling his millions of dollars. He's the one behind all, and there's no, like, these were crazy stories he was telling, so you can't be shocked. But somebody was shocked, I think. Who's Linda Kassotis, the defendant's mother. So let's take a listen to her, and then we'll take a listen to the judge.
Nicholas was not responsible for this. We know him to be a kind and gentle person. As you know from the testimony, we had not been in touch with him for years through circumstances beyond our control, and every member of our family suffered as a result of that. People missed him so desperately. My mother said she had never gone a Christmas without seeing or hearing from him. And suddenly he was gone from our lives and we had no idea why. He is a good and kind and gentle person. The thought that he could take someone else's life is just unbelievable, honestly. I respect the jury's work that they did, but they got this one wrong. I'm sorry.
This case has revealed a level of depravity that truly shocks the conscience. To put together this elaborate scheme, this web of lies, creating this fictional character, Jim McIntyre, who does not exist. You wrote fiction, and your life was a fiction, at least the last 6 or 7 years. And then you carried out, or the evidence shows that you carried out a brutal, horrific, gruesome murder of Mindy, someone who's been described by various witnesses as beautiful, kind, loving, vibrant, smart. And all of her hopes and dreams vanished in an instant. Her life tragically cut short by you. And I described to this jury this morning the elements of the crime of malice murder. The language used in the Georgia statute is that the circumstances show an abandoned and malignant heart. That describes you. You have caused so much harm to your own family, to all of those who have been impacted by your deeds. This is truly a heinous crime. Totality of the sentence being a sentence of life without parole plus 20 years to serve.
He's gone. He's gone. Kelly Craft, Court TV legal correspondent, spoke with one of the jurors afterwards, the jury foreperson. Take a listen.
You came back rather quickly, the jury did, with a verdict.
Right.
Walk me through it.
Well, the jury, we all sat there and took the time to really diverge, actually indulge in all the evidence that took place in this 2-week trial. And we as a jury, we already knew that after so long of actually taking in all the information, all the evidence, and everyone, all the witnesses that came up and spoke their piece, and we took notes, and as we got into it, it's not necessarily the fact that it was a short period of time. It was more that we were together on a joint decision. We didn't take a vote initially. When we got back to the jury room, it was unanimous. We considered all the facts. We went over all the counts. We really broke down every count and read everything that was there. All the evidence that provided the verdict that we got to. It really wasn't one initial on one side or the other. We came to it as a collective.
Paulette Lofton, it seemed like it was a pretty easy job for them because he testified. All the evidence before that was overwhelming as well. It doesn't shock me, but the description by the jury foreperson is we walked in and we're like, all right, I guess he's guilty, right?
And I think that happens. I definitely think the defendant did himself a disservice with testifying. I don't really think the verdict would have been any different, but I do think this was a situation where the finger pointing did not work. Without having some evidence, some concrete evidence that there was this actual person and that he may be to blame, it's just not enough. I think the judge was right. I think he created a fiction and stuck to it. And it was so far-fetched that there was no way a jury was going to believe it.
Josh, this was a 2-week trial. The jury came back in like an hour. I mean, extremely fast. Was justice served today?
But, given the evidence, the overwhelming evidence, given the fact that the prosecution had a very clear beginning, middle, and end, yes, that the jury had a clean sweep here, all 12 counts. They've had enough. They said that they went over all the evidence in an hour. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. But the evidence was clear. Also, I agree with my colleague that the defendant probably shouldn't have taken the stand. I don't think he needed to because his statements about Jim McIntyre already came in. And so, he's not really adding anything to it. And he let himself be exposed before everybody with all the inconsistencies, all the weirdness about himself and his life. The jury, at the end of the day, didn't buy it.
Yeah, I felt bad for Mom. I get it, Mom, just like a child doesn't want to believe it. I understand that. What do you think life is going to be like behind bars for him, Matthew Mangino? He's a JAG. He's a lawyer. Do you think he becomes popular because he'll be able to write endless motions for all of his roommates and new friends that he's going to make?
Yeah, well, he's going to be a jailhouse lawyer, and he's going to probably be fairly decent at it because, number one, we know he can be very creative based on the case that he put forward and the explanation for what happened here. So he has some ability to be creative and think outside the box, as absurd as it can be. The other thing that struck me about this, Vinnie, was the jury foreperson. He was almost apologizing for how quickly that they made a decision in this case. And hey, I don't think he needs to apologize. Everybody who was watching this trial, and certainly the jurors who saw every bit of evidence and heard every bit of testimony, knew that this was ridiculous. It was a fairy tale, and it ended as it should have.
Absolutely. By the way, as a prison lawyer, I wonder if he'll do pro bono work or if he'll get paid with, I don't know. Do they still have cigarettes? Maybe not. All right, Matthew Mangino, Josh Colesrud, Paulette Lofton, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Great to have you here. When we come back, I will reveal something else you need to know tonight, plus coming up next hour.
Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, a grandmother at the center of a chilling murder-for-hire plot. Did Donna Adelson mastermind her own son-in-law's execution to keep her family together? Her son Charlie has already been convicted, but why hasn't her daughter Wendy been charged? Tonight, we investigate.
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Welcome to Closing Arguments.
What's happening here?
It's unreal. Let me show you exactly what happened.
Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan, weeknights at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Welcome back. Time to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the big board. What do we have? More money, more problems. You won't believe this story. A man wins $167 million. The next day gets arrested. We've got the body cam, and Megan Mannering from Scripps News Group has the story.
From millions of dollars to one spectacular downfall. The high of landing the biggest Kentucky Powerball jackpot in history didn't last long.
Put your hands behind your back right now. Put your hands behind your back and get against the wall.
Just days after snapping this photo, beaming next to his mother and girlfriend having won $167 million, James Shannon Farthing was arrested in Florida. Body cam footage shows officers responding to a bar fight at his hotel in St. Pete late on April 29th. As a Pinellas County deputy detains one man, Farthing, shirtless, is seen kicking the deputy in the face.
Put your hands behind your back right now. Put your hands behind your back and get against the wall.
Watch as the deputy deploys his taser 3 times. Handcuffed on the ground, Farthing attempts an apology.
You see I have him, and you walk up and you kick him, and you hit me in the face. I'm sorry, man.
On the other side of the bar, Farthing's girlfriend, Jacqueline Fightmaster, can be seen trying to explain.
We came to the Kentucky Lottery in Louisville, and we claimed the check, which was $167.3 million.
Okay.
But seconds later, she's arrested for public intoxication.
She's me public intox.
The two were eventually released. Farthing's mother bonded him out before he was extradited to Kentucky. The lottery winner was released from the Scott County Jail on June 22nd for time served, but heads back to the Sunshine State for his case there next month. Megan Mannering, LEX 18 News.
Well, hopefully they turn their lives around with $167 million and do some good for their family. All right. Take a look at your screens, folks. We have a missing child who needs your help tonight. Her name is Abigail Prewitt. She's been missing since August 6th out of Henderson, Nevada. If you see Abigail, pick up the phone, make a call, make a difference. 911, 1-800-THE-LOST, or you can call the Henderson Police Department in Nevada. That phone number is on your screen right now. Let's see if we can get Abigail to a safe place tonight. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime. Vinnie Politan Investigates is next. In the meantime, please don't forget to hug the kids.